And so, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody this morning. Good to be here where I am. It's still cold, despite it being the end of May, but it is at least sunny. And so it's nice to sit in the sun and enjoy some slightly warmer temperatures in the afternoon. This is the season of the Buddha's birthday right now. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the Buddha's birthday. I had the opportunity last Sunday to attend the Buddha's birthday celebration at a Vietnamese temple in Seattle, along with Brother River. I also had the opportunity, since I was up there, to join Brother River for their morning Sunday Zoom service. And so my apologies to anyone who's here today who was there last week. You'll get a slight rerun on the Dharma talk, but not an exact copy. Uh, the Buddha's birthday celebration was a wonderful one. It's typically observed by most Buddhists sometime in the spring. The originally in the uh, Indian month of Vaisakha, from which we get the modern word Vesak, which is a term usually used to describe the celebration either of the Buddha's birthday or a combined commemoration of the Buddha's birth, awakening, and death. And that is the uh, month that in a East Asian Buddhism, at least Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and so forth, has been established as being on the eighth day of the fourth month, eighth day of the fourth lunar month in each of those countries. Typically, Japan uses a modern calendar and typically does it on April 8th on our solar calendar. But on the lunar calendar, it can vary anywhere from late April to early June. And so, as I said, this is the season for Buddha's birthday celebration because the observances vary according to cultural tradition, to the particular calendar used, and for the same reason that we don't always do things on the exact day of, because we want to do them on weekends or do it on a day when we can get together with the people that we're celebrating with. And so we went, River and I, to the Buddha's birthday celebration at Chua Van Hoa in Seattle and got to participate in the ceremony, including the ceremonial bathing of the baby Buddha. If you've never seen the baby Buddha, or maybe you have and didn't know exactly what you were looking at, it looks a little bit like Saturday Night Fever Buddha. He's standing and pointing with one hand up and one hand down in a very disco-ish looking move. And so I'm going to share the story of where that comes from and the origin of the tradition of bathing this representation of the Buddha. The legend of the Buddha's birth that comes down to us uh, tells us that his mother, as she was approaching giving birth, was making the traditional return to her parents' home and didn't make it. She had to stop at a park near a small town we now call Lumbini in India, where she gave birth in the park. The legend says that the Buddha sprang from her side, fully formed, and depictions show him being more akin to a 6 to 12 month old than to an infant. But the story says that he took 7 steps, and where he stepped, a lotus sprang up at each point. At the seventh step, he pointed to the sky and to the ground and said, "In heaven and earth, I am destined to become the awakened one. No more will I be born into suffering." And he then grew to be the man that we now know as the Buddha, the awakened one, who shared with the world the teaching of the origin of suffering and how we can free ourselves from it. And part of the story of the legend is that he was also being showered by a divine rain, a gentle rain, as he was taking his first 7 steps. And so ceremoniously, when we honor his birthday, we have a statue of the baby Buddha, usually not very large, a few inches to maybe a foot and a half tall, standing in a basin filled with water or sweet tea, from which people to line up and take turns grabbing a ladle and rinsing the statue, bathing the baby Buddha. Now, talk a little bit about uh, the legendary nature of this story. We can think of this story, as with so many others, um, by either taking things literally or looking at it metaphorically, depending on what speaks most clearly to us and what helps us enter through the Dharma gate, through the teaching. Uh, I can share that from my own experience and the experience of a lot of people I've known over the years. I've had a tendency early in my explorations to be a lot more dismissive of things that didn't seem especially plausible to my rational mind. And in as I've come to recognize that there's a distinction that we can make between the message that's being delivered and the vehicle through which it's being delivered. And the vehicle is going to be whatever works best for whoever is listening. Whether the vehicle conveying the message is a bicycle or an auto or a boat, uh, whatever best helps us to see that. And also the realization, and share with you this kind of analogy that we have modern legends that we don't struggle nearly as much with as we do with ancient legends. We look at ancient legends and we think there's no way some guy, died on a cross, 3 days later rose from the dead and did all of these things. And then so we're like, yeah, and if that can't happen, all those teachings he said about compassion and loving thy neighbor, I mean, they must not be very true either. There's no way that this baby sprang fully formed from a woman's side, took 7 steps, and started speaking so clearly and wisely. So the rest of it must be nonsense too. Well, we don't think that when we watch our modern legends, like Star Wars, and we hear Master Yoda tell us that fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And we don't just say, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense, because there's no such thing as little green men or lightsabers or the force. So the rest of this must be nonsense too. Um, Rather, we listen to that message and we go, yeah, there's a lot in that. There's truth in that. I do recognize from my own fear that it leads to anger, that it leads to hate, that it leads to suffering. And we don't even bother to dismiss it because of the vehicle. In fact, the vehicle is probably why we were willing to listen to it anyway, instead of reading it in some dry textbook or listening to some stodgy professor lecturing at a lectern going, all right, I get it, anger leads to suffering. Okay, can we go watch Star Wars now? Uh, and so uh, for many years, I just had my own personal struggles with this legend of the Buddha's birth, because to me the Buddha was a man, a person like any of us, who grew up, encountered suffering in his life, and then dedicated himself to figuring out how to free himself from it. And to me, the great value in that was recognizing that he was a person like me. If he could do it, so could I. And so hearing this fantastic thing that he was born a Buddha just didn't make sense to me, until I found, the perspective that uh, helped me accept the message and be more accepting of the vehicle as a metaphor to help teach me and anyone who's willing to listen that what the Buddha later explained in the Lotus Sutra, one of the most prominent sutras in our Mahayana Buddhist tradition, is the notion of Buddha nature, the idea that all of us, every being, has within them the potential and the capacity to awaken to become a Buddha, which is simply awakening. Buddha means awakening. It is literally the name of the game. Buddhism is the religion, school, practice, philosophy, however you want to view it, of awakening, of waking up to the nature of our situation, of the sufferings we experience in our situation, and how we can free ourselves from those sufferings. And to me, the baby Buddha, I've come to have just a great respect for this legend, this metaphor. When I recognize that the baby Buddha is the baby Buddha within me, is the baby Buddha within all of us. This is the potential or the seed for awakening that exists in each of us that we don't see because we're burying it continuously behind the cloud of delusion, of anger, of greed, the three poisons. And so when we bathe this symbolic representation of the baby Buddha, not only are we honoring and commemorating the person who became the Buddha of our tradition, our original teacher, but we're symbolically rinsing the poisons from our own mind, from our own interior baby Buddha. We're rinsing away the greed, the anger, the delusion that keeps us from seeing our own awakened nature, our own Buddha nature. And in so doing, we we free that baby Buddha to grow within us to become the Buddha so that we ourselves can realize our Buddha nature potential and become the Buddhas that we were always destined to be. And so when we commemorate the Buddha's birthday, and what we're doing is we're honoring the arrival of the one who showed us that there has never not been a Buddha in this world. And because each of us is that Buddha, we just have to wake up to it. And we work on waking up to it every moment of every day. And so that is what I wanted to say about the Buddha's birthday and the Buddha within and our delightful tradition of purifying and rinsing the baby Buddha without and within. Thank you, everybody, for listening.